I've known Chris Murphy for, I don't know, 10, 20 years maybe.
Dozen.
No, a dozen years. Okay. He is an expert example of someone who is not pinned down by any profession. He has jobs and he has vocations, and he has multiple ones. He's a general contractor. He has tutored people in classical languages, and he has been sort of a mentor to a number of churches, I believe, in their education programs. There's a lot of churches, small Protestant churches that have very low income groups, and they struggle to learn scriptures and to understand their situation, and nothing that the public system is doing helps them, of course, at all. In fact, you may have something a little bit to say about class on this matter, right?
Mm.
Yes. So, Chris Murphy.
Good evening. I think I'm going to just introduce a few books, but I want to give a little biography about me. I remember reading 1984 in maybe junior year of high school, and being just astonished, captivated with this terrible vision of tyranny. And it was many, many years later that I came across the work of, you may be familiar with John Taylor Gatto. John Taylor Gatto was one of the Mad Men advertising guys, having the martini lunch, 1961, 62. Decides that, it's too early to go that path. So he quits, gets a job in New York City public schools, where he taught for 30 years. And the first day, the assistant principal sent him to the typing class. This was in a Harlem school with 70 black kids, no black teachers. And the administrator says, by the way, he's a substitute teacher, right? You don't have a teaching certificate, so you can't teach typing. But you'll just have to watch them and keep them under control, right? So the kids are all, he walks in, the kids are typing away under those big Smith Corona,
Royals.
You don't all remember them, but
I remember
sort of
a
vaguely
Royal
remember.
I was faced with.
And he says, no typing. Sorry, kids, no typing. And they're like, the inmates have heard this before. So suddenly, some kid picks up his chair, and he's just had enough. He's going to attack Gatto. Gatto picks up his chair. It's a standoff. Gatto's only like 26, and he realizes the absurdity of the situation. He puts the chair down and says, "Isn't this typing class? Get typing." And that began 30 years of basically circumventing the system to try and make good things happen.
He got named Teacher of the Year before they fired him, right?
Well, he got named Teacher of the Year in the early 90s, and he got up in front of 1,000 people and said, this is terrible. They wanted to yank him off, but they couldn't. So he has a big 400-page book called The Underground History of American Education, which is worth reading. And this is about half a dozen essays. One of them is called The 7-Lesson School Teacher. He says every school from Hollywood to Harlem teaches these lessons. And it's fairly depressing. But I'll just read you briefly this is his take. 1, confusion. Everything's jumbled together and it doesn't quite clear how they fit together. 2nd, class position. You're in, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever position you're in. You resent those above you and you despise those below you. Indifference, it goes on. But there is, in his other book, he does, I'll just give a little history because I find it very, very interesting. Well, basically, the Prussian model. By 1820, the Prussian, this is 50 years before Germany's unification, had a well-organized system where about 95% of the population were trained with very meager rudiments of information, and about 4% were trained for high-end technical mathematics, mechanical competence to run the affairs of state and the economy, and 1% were given, I'll read you because this is what I think, there's something about how this model of education that I find very attractive. At the top of the heap was the Academian School, reserved for the top 1% of Prussian culture, where the elite sent their children to learn how to think strategically, contextually, in wholes, see the whole picture, learned complex processes, useful knowledge, studied history, wrote copiously, argued often, read deeply, and mastered tasks of command.
Sounds Confucian.
Basically, for about 40 years, I've been a teacher in various churches, and I've been mentoring mostly young men and teaching children in classes. And the model that I have been working from comes from a letter in the New Testament, which I read a little over 40 years ago. And it struck me forcefully because I could see how diametrically opposed it was to the Prussian model, which I hadn't heard of, or the Orwellian model, the inner party, the outer party, and the proles, right? I mean, that's the model we have, by the way. Colossians 1, Colossae was a town in Asia Minor, and this is the Apostle Paul saying, "We proclaim him, Christ, admonishing everyone, teaching everyone in all wisdom, so that we may present everyone mature in Christ. To this end I labor, struggling with all his energy powerfully." The idea of teaching everybody all the goodies, right? You're going to take the entire jelly bean jar and give it to everybody. You're going to give it to the low class people, the middle class people, you know. You're going to give away the riches. What I found is that it's often a tough going, and that maybe it's always been this way, but people at the top resist this, people at the bottom, the middle, or a lot of people resist this. People get used to whatever measure of resources that they're used to.
Diet.
They're used to a certain diet. I met with a man last fall. I met with or talked with people from about 7 or 8 churches, and I ended up having very good conversations, of course, with the people that I knew personally, and ended up having a sit down with one man, terrific guy that I'd known through work, and explained to him in brief, you know, what the problem is and what can be done. And everybody can be taught to read. Everybody can have rekindled the love of knowledge, right? The reason kids are into everything is because they're curious, and that can be rekindled. And his first response was, "A lot of pastors won't like this." And I thought, oh, I keep thinking I'm like hit the level of cynic. I'm not sure he's right, by the way, but I do understand that people get used to, you know, whatever I had was good enough. You know, you get used to settling for a pretty meager gruel. And so I recommend, so that's basically my little life project, is to get people to get rekindled wherever they are in the society or in their spiritual or intellectual journey. I highly recommend this book that I've only read 2.5 times. What he's done is to go native in the world of the child, right? Imagine going out into the woods at night. You want to see what the raccoons and the skunks are doing. You go out there with your boots and your flashlight, and I see you, stop. You know, if you go out, walk around softly, get to know them, you can find out what's actually going on. So Holt has done that. And I also recommend it for anybody, pastors, teachers, revolutionaries, professors, mayors, anybody who's in a position of leadership, who's prone to expounding. There's a lot in here about the whole process of communicating to people. You have something you want to tell them, but you got to tell them in a way that, you know, they're going to get. And you got to give them a lot of respect, because people do have a pretty good meter for getting disrespected. Although even that can get torn down. So there's a number of books here. This is the glorious Noah Webster spelling primer. I purchased this for $15 at Stockbridge, not Stockbridge, Sturbridge Village. And every time I handle this, I think of the millions and billions of dollars spent on education. Half the kids can't read. Whereas if you go through this, you'll come out being able to read. So that's about it. One last thing I'll plug for anybody who's interested in your own adult learning or any involvement you have with children, which is the trivia. This was basically the basis for organizing knowledge from about the time of Aristotle to World War I. And when you see on an old brick building, grammar school, it's referring to the grammar of logic, grammar, and rhetoric. I mean, it was, they didn't put the whole three on the front, but that's what it referred to. And for various reasons, there's a lot of rich stuff. This is a whole perspective that's worth examining. And I guess that's about it.